the Pergamum Museum. And I've been there. And what is there is a reconstruction of some of the ruins of the ancient city of Babylon. Somebody went to Babylon, to the ruins. They brought some of the ruins back to the Pergamum Museum, and they reconstructed them. And you can go there, and you can see the procession way that went right through the Ishtar Gate into Babylon, and you can see all kinds of images of winged lions. That a winged lion was a symbol of ancient Babylon. It's a historical fact. And just about all scholars have recognized that that winged lion represented Babylon. And what was the nation that conquered Babylon? It was Persia, Medo-Persia. And what was the nation that conquered Greece? Or that conquered, there you go, that conquered the leopard? It was Greece, right. Alexander the Great. And he was very fast. He conquered the world in 8 years. In the name of Greece, the Macedonian prince. This is basic history, and I think that's why God represented Greece as a leopard, because it was very fast. And then what fourth nation conquered Greece? It was Rome. That's right, the Roman Empire, which was the greatest and most powerful of all the nations that were before it. And again, just about all scholars recognize Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome. It perfectly fits this prophecy, and there you see on the screen there. Now let's go back to Daniel, and let's take a look again at the 7th verse. At the end of verse 7, when it talks about that fourth beast, that terrible, strong beast, which represents the Roman Empire, no question about it, it says at the end, it had how many horns? It had 10 horns, right, 10 horns. And what happened when the Roman Empire fell, it was divided among various nations, 10 nations, in Western Europe. Now then, if you keep going, in verse 8, Daniel says, I was considering the horns. I was looking at those 10 horns that came out of the fourth beast, the Roman Empire. And behold, there came up, and what came up? He said, there came up another horn, a little one, coming up among them, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. And there in this horn there were eyes, like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. So here comes this 11th horn. It comes up out of the fourth beast. It comes up among the 10 horns. And as Daniel's looking at it, he sees eyes in it. He sees it has a mouth speaking great things. And just about all scholars recognize that whoever or whatever this is, their interpretations differ, but just about everybody recognizes that this horn is Antichrist. It's something Antichrist, whoever or whatever it is. Now go down to verse 21 and take a look at another characteristic of this horn. Verse 21 says, I was watching, Daniel said in his dream, I was watching, and the same horn, what was it doing? It was making war against the saints and prevailing against them. So this is a characteristic of the horn. Now, if you put the characteristics together, and there are others, we're not going to look up all of them, but there you can see on the screen, one characteristic we know is it has eyes like a man. Now, this text does not say that this horn will be just one man, does it? It doesn't say that. It says it would have eyes like a man. And then it also says, we already read in verse 8, that it would have a mouth speaking great things, making great claims for itself. This is a very proud and self-exalted horn. And then we already read in verse 21 that we know that this horn eventually is going to be a persecuting horn, right? It's going to make war on who? Who's it going to make war on? It says it will make war on the saints, right? The saints of God. That's very, very significant. And it says that it would even overcome them at some point in history. So these are some of the pieces. It would come out of the fourth beast, which represented what nation? Roman Empire. It would rise up among the 10 horns, which represented the division of the Roman Empire. And then it would have a mouth speaking great things, eyes like a man, some kind of a human eyesight going on there. And then it would also eventually make war against the saints. Now, you might need to hold on to your seats, your seat belts. Put your seat belts on. Sometimes when I cover big subjects, I tell my audience, I say, you need to put your seat belts on. Sometimes I tell them when we talk about certain topics, I say, don't miss this next meeting because that's a 5 seatbelt subject. Or don't miss this meeting, this is an 8 seatbelt subject. And every once in a while, I even have a 10 seatbelt subject. Well, this is one of those seatbelt subjects. I'm going to share with you some history, some very, very significant history that many people have just lost sight of. But it's very real, it happened, and we need to understand it, especially in the light of Bible prophecy. So here we go. One of the most powerful movements in the history of Christianity was called the Protestant Reformation. Have you heard of it? Most of you have. The Protestant Reformation. It took place in the 1500s. It started a little bit early in the 1400s, went on into the 1500s, and it was led by certain individuals that were men of God who were willing to stand up for truth and even to die for their faith. People like John Wycliffe, who lived in the 1400s, the latter part of the 1400s, and he was one of the first to translate the Bible into English. He was an Englishman. And then there was Martin Luther. And so Martin Luther, he was really the main one that gave birth to the Reformation, following in the footsteps of Wycliffe. And Luther's preaching led to the development of the Lutheran Church, to the starting of the Lutheran Church. And then there was John Calvin, the Presbyterian, Calvin in Geneva, in Switzerland, Calvin's ministry. And then there was later on John Wesley, who founded the Methodist Church. And there were others like Huss and Melanchthon and Jerome. And the list goes on and on and on and on and on of Protestants who rose up in the 1400s and the 1500s to preach and teach from the Bible. Now, what really got the Protestant Reformation going was really an event took place in the year 1450. Anybody remember what happened in 1450? The man's name was Gutenberg. Gutenberg invented the printing press. 1450 was a milestone year. And the first book off the press was, guess what book? It was the Bible. That's right. This is the first book ever printed with movable type. And what happened was, I'll just give you some history behind this. What happened in the 1400s and then into the 1500s was Bibles began to be printed and copied by hand. And they began to circulate around Europe and into England. And what happened was people began to read Bibles for the first time in their lives. They'd never read the Bible before. And they started reading. And as they read, they started reading the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and they discovered the powerful good news about Jesus Christ, our advocate, our sacrifice, who died for all of our sins, and who is the only way to the Father. They discovered this, and they fell in love with Christ. They discovered the good news. And as they did that, as they read the Bible, and as they looked at the church, they discovered that a lot of traditions had come into Christianity. Many, many traditions that were actually taking the eyes of people off of Jesus Christ. People were having to work their way to heaven. They had to do all kinds of things to get to heaven. And there were all kinds of traditions. And they couldn't go directly to the Father through Jesus Christ. They had to go through priests and through the Pope and through the church and through the saints. And people realized, as they read the Bible, that they don't need to do this. They can just go directly to the Father through Jesus Christ. That's what happened. And they were so moved by this that they wanted to reform the church, which was predominantly at that time, the major church was the Roman Catholic Church, centered in Rome. That was the mother church. And these people, most of them were Catholics. And they tried to reform the church. They wanted to get people back to the Bible, back to Jesus. Well, what happened was they experienced fierce opposition for their preaching.